So good.
All right.
Yep.
So it's 12:30. So what we'll do is we will kick off. So welcome and happy Flexible Working Day to everybody. We're delighted to have you here with this very interactive panel around navigating life after COVID and what are the implications for flexible work. So before we kick off, I do want to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land, which we all meet on today. I want to pay my respects to the elders past and present. So thank you for joining us. Today we've got a fabulous panel. So we've got Matthew Salisbury, Regional Director of South Australia and Northern Territory for WSP. We've got Dr. Nikki Vincent, South Australia's Commissioner for Equal Opportunity, and Kim Cheetah, Partner at PwC, and they're all members of the Chiefs of South Australia Gender Diversity Group. So thank you for joining us. What I'm going to ask and go straight to our audience is if you've got your device, please grab it and go to menti.com. And what we want you to do is type in the code 236576. And what would really help us today is to understand what hat you're wearing. So today, have you joined from a perspective of a leader, a manager, HR professional, employee, self-employed, or other? So what you have to do is jump onto menti.com, type in the code, and then that will help us really bespoke our responses to help you today. So far we've had 5 responses. So how Menti works is if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, we can see how many people have provided a response. We've had almost 100 people respond for this webinar today, which is really exciting. But I will share that a lot of people don't use Menti. So if it's easier for you to type in the chat, then please do that. So what we're finding today is there's largely leaders and managers, HR professionals and employees split. All right. Next question. I'd love you to go to your device again and tell us what comes to mind when you hear this term or this phrase, flexible working and navigating life after COVID-19. So what we need you to do is share with us a couple of words. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves and give us their reflections on what's coming up in this word cloud, and also a little bit about what comes to mind for them when they think about navigating life after COVID. So we can see here the responses are starting to roll in. And what happens with this Menti tool is it creates an algorithm. So the more that people say a word, the bigger it is. So we can see here that change is something that many of us are feeling and thinking. Opportunity, flexibility, different. So what I'll do is I'll let the responses roll in. And Dr. Vincent, if I can ask you first to introduce yourself and share with us what your reflections are on this fabulous word cloud that's rolling in.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Fabulous.
Great. I guess what comes to mind and what's obviously coming up for the audience is that the change and opportunity and flexibility, mostly positive, but there is some ambiguity there. There's some people concerned, uncertainty, inequality, and those are all things I think we're going to actually have a bigger conversation about today. It's certainly created flexible work isn't just working from home. Working from home is one way of flexible working, but there are many more, and I'm sure we'll have a broader discussion about that. But we know that we've been basically pivoted straight into about 10 years ahead of where we thought we might be now, with the pandemic forcing so many of us to work from home and the opportunities that that's created, but also the challenges. So I'm with the audience here in terms of the considerations and the issues and the opportunities and the innovation. And I think we're going to have a very good discussion about that today.
Absolutely, thank you. And do you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself and your role as well? That would be really helpful for us all.
Sure. I am South Australia's Equal Opportunity Commissioner. It's a statutory appointment. It means I administer the Equal Opportunity Act in South Australia, which covers 15 grounds for potential discrimination, including gender, sexual harassment and so forth. And in fact, although disability discrimination is our #1 complaint at the Commission, if you add sex discrimination, sexual harassment, parenting discrimination, association with a child, and all of those things, which are mostly about women, then that's the biggest kind of area. We handle complaints, but we also, a big part of our work is promoting equal opportunity and preventing discrimination in the community. But 70% of our complaints come from the workplace, so that is a big focus for us. And we've done lots of work in this area. We've done work with the South Australian Police and with the Metropolitan Fire Service and with universities in promoting a culture that is gender equality and eliminating sexual harassment. So some very big projects in some very male-dominated industries there.
Just make sure I'm off mute. Fabulous, and thank you for joining us today, Vicky. I know you're very busy and we really appreciate your contribution to this fabulous panel. So what I want to do is now ask Kim, if you don't mind introducing yourself and sharing us with your reflections on this word cloud. You are muted because we had some feedback before, so you will just need to take yourself off mute.
Can you hear me okay, Vanessa?
Perfect, thank you.
Fantastic. So thank you for the opportunity today and the introduction. So as you mentioned, partner with PwC based here in Adelaide. I've been a partner and working in professional services firms for over 30 odd years now with a fairly diverse range of experience. But I think the two things that I have a deep passion for that probably bring me here to this conversation is I'm part of PwC's diversity and inclusion leadership team nationally, and I lead that work here in our office in Adelaide. I'm also the co-chair of our National Reconciliation Governance Committee. So we are an Elevate RAP partner as a firm, and so I'm equally deeply involved in all of the work we're doing from a reconciliation point of view as part of a broader diversity and inclusion strategy as well. Reflections on the cloud. It's easy to dive to the opportunity, and it's, I think, to the point that Nikki made, it's great that there are actually so many positive words. I think perhaps different from the first few weeks, as people have got very used to the technology, to different ways of working and engaging, a lot of people are really seeing the upside and different ways of connecting with people, different ways of considering what productivity actually looks like and how they can deliver outcomes for their work. It does come with its challenges, both from an employee and employer point of view, and I'm sure we'll explore that a little bit more over the course of the next hour. But more and more now, the more people I talk to, they do see the enormous upside, but equally just a bit of caution that a permanent, flexible working from home scenario is not necessarily the ideal situation that everyone's looking for. So I think a hybrid will be what we perhaps find our way moving back to.
Wonderful, thank you, and welcome to you today, Kim.
Thank you.
And over you to Matt. Unfortunately, Matt, we can't get his camera to work, so yeah, sorry, Matt.
Hi there. Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. Sorry about the video. I can assure you I'm not at home in my pajamas. So look, just a little bit about me. So I'm the Regional Director for South Australian Northern Territory for WSP. I've also been involved with the Chiefs for Gender Equity for coming on 5 years and current chair. What that participation has provided for me is an enormous amount of insight into the many different challenges that we face moving forward in making our workplaces and outside of our workplaces a more equitable and you know, efficient. I'll call it efficient because there's a great business case behind gender equality as well. So I think that when I look at this chart here, one thing that really points out to me is the one-size-fits-all approach that has historically been associated with the working day. Time has become more precious than it ever has. It's a precious resource for us all, and we should have the flexibility around how we manage our time more effectively. Typically, the 40-hour week is a distant memory. A lot of people work a hell of a lot more than 40 hours a week. Hence, having that ability to be able to flex into whatever suits people's lives is really important. And that just really shows through the responses that you see on that page there, because there's a lot of diversity in the views and the opinions as well. So giving people choice is absolutely key.
And that's been part of our journey, hasn't it, over the last couple of months, where a lot of people haven't had that choice. It's been largely forced upon us, which has resulted in an element of a paradigm shift, which takes us to the next question, which has been a paradigm shift forced, you know, largely by this global pandemic. What we'd love to hear from you is a new paradigm for workplaces and gender equality. Do you agree or disagree? So on the bottom end of the scale is disagree. I'm not sure why that's not on there. It might be when you type it, when you go online. And then the top end of the scale is agree. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Dr. Vincent to share with us her perspectives on this. And in particular, I'd really love to get your thoughts around, you know, are you hearing and seeing that the conversation is now broader? So it's broader than caring, responsibilities, and those others that are outlined in legislation. And are we talking more, do you think? So historically, when we've spoken about flexibility, so often people have said part-time work or working from home. Do you think that we are actually in the midst of a paradigm shift? And you're on mute, my apologies.
I definitely think that we are in some workplaces. Now, when we're talking about flexible work, there are a lot of jobs that aren't able to be done as flexibly as others, and a lot of jobs that aren't able to be done flexibly are those in blue-collar industries, frontline workers, and a lot of the industries that women work in, the caring sector, the retail, the food, hospitality sectors, all of which have been dramatically affected by COVID-19. So yes, I think we have seen a huge shift towards a better understanding of flexibility. So many organisations that have resisted this have had to jump into it, and having jumped into it have seen how it's not as bad as they thought, or it's great in lots of circumstances. So there has been a big shift. I think it's traditionally, flexible work has traditionally been seen as something for women, and I hope the paradigm shifts for us so that it becomes something that has become socially and culturally acceptable for men. Mm-hmm. And that is how women will benefit. Now, we know that women have been impacted much more by COVID-19. The industries that they work in, the fact that they work in casual, less secure employment, they've been much more likely to lose their jobs. And in places where children couldn't go to school, they've borne the brunt of homeschooling. So having to manage a job or losing a job and then doing a lot more unpaid work. And of course, with children and families at home, there's a lot more housework, and women have taken that on as well. But what I hope is that with men also being forced to work from home and work more flexibly, that we will see that become much more socially acceptable. And gradually men will be more likely to take that up. And then more likely to share the care and the housework. And that's how we'll see the shift benefit women.
Fabulous. And I would love to see some research on this down the track. I call it the gender flex gap, because obviously we've got the gender pay gap, but I see that we've always had, and it's becoming more and more pronounced around that flexism, a word I just made up, it's not in law, as you know, that discrimination for people working flexibly. And in my experiences, it has been largely men. So bringing that gender conversation to the table in organisations is so important.
There's most workplaces that embrace flexible work and have flexible working policies. It's still less likely that men are going to take up flexible work, and still more likely that they will be told no. In fact, I think men are 25% less likely to be granted flexible work if they ask for it.
Yeah, I hope that this has changed, but who knows if it's changing for the positive. Hearing some stories at the moment which would make your hair curl, Nikki. I've got a question for you here. Question for Nikki. Do you think now is a great time to undertake a review of our policies, and how do you see us engaging employees remotely, doing this remotely?
As in reviewing our policies remotely? Is that what we're talking about?
I think Sally's asking, she wants to review, is it a good time to review their internal flexible working policies in their organisation at the moment? And if it is a good time, how would they do that while engaging their workforce while they're working from home most of the time?
Sally, I think it's an excellent time. I think if we didn't already have policies for this kind of work, and even if we did, we've had to really ramp them up and think about all sorts of other contingencies. So we, rather than just drift back into the office and, you know, settle back into the old routine, I think it's been an experiment that's shown us that working from home as one way of working flexibly is a really good option for some people, and some people should have the choice. And I don't want to say everyone should have the choice, but it's not a perfect option for everybody. If you've got small children who aren't at school, it can be a challenge. If you're in a not a very good relationship, working from home with your partner at home can be risky and uncomfortable and toxic, and the office is where you want to go to escape. So I think that it's not the solution for everybody. But I think now, with everybody having had this experience and come through this experience, is a great time to engage those people in all of the complexities, what's worked, what hasn't worked for individuals, for groups, for teams, and for the employer. And to then develop what might become a new, more flexible normal.
Yeah, I call it a modern approach to flexibility, because I kept hearing people saying this new way of working, which we all know isn't new.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, I was just going to add to the conversation that we just had. For WSP, we undertook. We've got some pretty robust, what I think are pretty robust flexible working policies. However, all of them can be improved. But early in the days of COVID, we sent out a survey to all of our people, just asking them that question. And I think it was just that simple effort to put that survey out there to ask people, would they embrace more flexible working, and how would they go about that, so that we got that information back and we could actually use that information to inform how we actually evolve our policies as we move forward after this pandemic.
Fabulous. And it's a great baseline. Data is powerful, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Vanessa, do you mind if I add something as well here?
Please, I'd love you to, Kim.
Yeah, I do think the word new flexible working is actually very true, because I think the experience of the last couple of months is fundamentally different from what flexible working experience was beforehand. And no matter how many individuals in your organisation were flexibly working beforehand, it was always a very transactional, they were the flexible worker engaging with a traditional focused workplace, and often in ways and techniques and tools adapted for their one individual scenario, or just for a small group. Whereas what we've experienced in the last 3 months is everyone in many organisations working flexibly. So suddenly we're all on a Zoom meeting together. We're all having to think differently and connect with each other in a different way. And both the tools and the way we've gone about doing that has just been a fundamentally different experience, even for those who used to do flexible working in this situation. And I think it's one of the huge challenges moving forward, which is why it's a good time to think about the policies, because, a year from now, it won't be like it has been for the last 2 months. But how do you make the hybrid work? If you've, say, got 20% of your employees who are working flexibly and 80% in an office, but therefore you're trying to mix how do you connect on a Zoom meeting in that kind of scenario where 3 people are sitting at desks next to each other on a Zoom meeting? That all gets very awkward and difficult. And so actually starting to think about how do we accommodate this, but in a way that it's for everyone, not just for isolated individuals, I think is going to be one of those real challenges to think about now.
Yeah, absolutely. And where do you, like you said, where do you want to be? So where are you now, where you want to be, and working through what the stepping stones are is so important. And I think one of the things that I'm hearing a lot of is, yes, we had to rapidly uptake flexibility, which of course was flexible working from home, but it's also these split shifts and different patterns and working through the night and all of these other types of flexibility. But some of the fundamental pillars I'm seeing in many organisations just still aren't there around, well, getting clear expectations, really open and transparent communication.
Yeah.
The support, the trust, measurement based on outcomes. Productivity is a word that baffles people, but really once, in my experiences in my executive roles, it was asking the people, what's the output of your role?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really shone, I think, a really focused light on the fact that many organisations don't actually understand how to measure productivity or what it looks like for their people, let alone communicate it and manage it. And that's why a lot of, it also has probably put a focus on average performance management capabilities of middle to senior management. And so therefore the default under those 2 scenarios for people who aren't really good at doing performance management, and when it's not clear what good productivity looks like, the default is, if I can't see you, you can't be doing things.
Yeah.
And whilst that got broken over the last few months, I've heard it in a few individual conversations and language of late, that one of the things they can't wait to get back to the office is they can actually see their people again and know that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And that's not a good outcome from this. The opportunity here is to rethink good performance management to coach and educate people, but also to think about what does productivity mean in our organisation for that individual? How do we measure and manage it? And can that change the way we think about the world?
And to that extent, sorry, Nikki. I think in the middle management layer, it's upskilling the middle management layer that have got people sitting beneath them that have never had to encounter such an issue, and they don't have the tools to be able to lead in isolation. So a real focus on that, I think, is important in organisations.
I was going to add, I agree 100% with what Kim and Matt have just said. I think that fear of not being able to see team members every minute of the day, that idea of presentism, which is a very old-fashioned word, but it's still very relevant, and the lack of trust that seems to be such a big barrier for some employers.
Yeah, it still is, isn't it?
Yep.
And, with trust, I often say to people when they say they don't trust their team, I get them to think about, well, what builds trust and what undermines trust?
Yes.
Clear on those 2 things, it gets much easier to work through that. All right, so someone's already provided a response, which is fabulous. So I'm going to ask you to grab your device again, jump on menti.com and use the code 236576. And we'd love to hear from you. What do you think is the biggest challenge to embracing this new paradigm in my workplace? So I'll give you a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds to give us a response. And then Kim, I'm going to ask you a question, if that's okay, on your reflections of this, but also I'd really love to understand from your perspective, What are some of the risks and advantages of giving people more autonomy over how they manage their work in this modern way of flexibility? So the responses are, they just roll in, and as they come in, they'll just scroll. So mindset's big, we're seeing here quite a few times.
Yeah. I think we've probably started to see some themes there, Vanessa.
Yes.
It's funny, whilst technology was the first one, and there's no doubt that that some have hit the technology barrier, if this was a word cloud, I think it would be culture and trust. Which is reflecting a lot of what we were describing before. And I think the key to culture and trust is about being clear about what you're trying to achieve, but communication. And I think in most organisations, irrespective of the topic, there is just no downside to really thinking about what great communication looks like and how to do it effectively. And I think certainly the experiences I've had working with a whole range of different organisations during this time, those that have gone to we're going to use this opportunity to over-communicate, to communicate in different ways, to really connect with our people, have found it a lot easier process, and have started to see many more of the benefits and opportunities. They've also started to, I think, reap some rewards for a lot of individuals, they're actually finding that nature of their communication and engagement significantly enhanced. So we sometimes mistakenly think that if two people are sitting in a desk next to each other and exchange a few pleasantries a day, that they're engaging with each other and communicating effectively with each other. But they're not. But when you're consciously making a video call, talking about the challenges and issues of the day, checking in around people's mental health, checking in about what they're doing and what their week looks like and how you can help, it's a really richer and a deeper conversation as well when done right. And I think what a lot of people are reflecting in some of these notes is I suspect a very inconsistent experience at the moment. And to Matt's point, we've thrown an awful lot of middle and senior, quite frankly, not just middle management, senior management, executive management. We've thrown them in the deep end and haven't actually gone and thought, how do we equip them with the ability and the thought processes and tools to better and differently communicate. So I think that's fundamental to this. And equally, if we don't then invest in this going forward, we won't reap any benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. So from your experiences, Kim, both, professionally with your team and the organisations that you work with, what are some of the benefits of really giving that more autonomy to people over how they manage their work and really adopting that modern management, if I can call it that?
Yeah, look, I think that the benefits that we've actually absolutely seen over the recent time has been, firstly, actually when it's worked well, really better connected teams who are a lot more clear about what they're trying to do and what they need to do in their component parts of it, and a greater willingness to more regularly check in as teams, agree where everyone's at, and then get on with it. So that's been fantastic. Flexibility has really paid off for organisations. So, I've seen some organisations who never thought possible having call centres run by individuals in their homes connected via technology, and suddenly they can serve their customers on a much different timescale rather than a rigid 9 to 5 or locked in around certain limitations. They've also been able to get more people. So if they're an organisation who are broader than just South Australia, suddenly the ability to get expertise and knowledge involved in a project or an issue from across the country is almost seamless now, because it doesn't matter whether you're 2 doors away from another street in Adelaide or on the other side of the planet. This is how we've been communicating and sharing knowledge, sharing screens and getting things done. I haven't seen that widespread yet, but I've seen it in a few areas where it's really enabled some issues to cut through very quickly. There's clearly two benefits for individuals. You know, the work, for every one of the benefits though, there's absolutely risks. So we can talk to all of those as well. But, you know, it does give individuals greater flexibility. If you've got the discipline and the scenario right, better work-life balance as well, and a bit of a win-win. You know, if that commute time is translated into perhaps a bit of extra sleep, a bit of extra exercise, and possibly a bit more work, then everyone's better off for it, right?
Oh, absolutely. And can I ask the panel, so I'm really interested in all of your thoughts. We had a panel conversation this morning actually about the gender flex gap. And I also gave a talk this morning on the paradigm shift that we're seeing. And someone asked a question around, are there really benefits for business around flexibility? Which I provided my answer, but I'd love your thoughts around, are there really benefits for business, or is this still an individual-led conversation?
I can kick off on that. I think the research is in, and we know that there are benefits in terms of productivity, staff retention, staff engagement, and greater well-being. Where it's a choice. So where people are forced to work part-time when they don't want to, or in any situation where they don't have a choice, then you don't get the benefits. But when you give people choice and you allow them to work in the ways that work best for them and their lives and their other responsibilities outside of paid work, then you get greater productivity, less absenteeism, less sick leave, and much better well-being and much better retention and engagement.
Absolutely. I concur with both. Getting back to my earlier statement, you know, the one size all fits approach. Most of our businesses are structured in a way that most of our costs are the people that we employ. So we need to match our business to suit our employees more. That will get better engagement from our employees. It'll get better productivity from our employees. And then they have their choice. They have a choice in how they go about doing their work, how they live their lives, how they care for their loved ones and so forth. So long as there's that outcomes-based mentality and not that presenteeism, which I think, you know, for anything that's good that's come out of this, the presenteeism is something that has sort of diminished somewhat, because, you know, people can obviously see now that this is actually working. Yes, it's got some hurdles as well associated with it, but flexibility is key to the future of business success, I would say.
I like what you say there, Matt, around this is pandemic working. So we've tested flexibility and we've proven that it can work, but it does come back to that one size fits all, and the choice element is so important. Before we move on, Kim, did you have any reflections on that?
Look, I think one of I'm probably dangerously turning to challenges around it, but it's important that it works for the employer and the employee. We can't find ourselves in a situation where we have disconnected flexibility. So, you know, employers do need to rethink what they can and can't do, and this process has enforced them to do that, and they've realised that a lot of fixed views about how things had to be done can be challenged and can be thought about differently. You know, whether it's from how we teach our kids to how we run call centres to how we actually provide face-to-face service actually via technology. It doesn't literally have to be face-to-face, but it's got to be right for the employment scenario. And, you know, Nikki described earlier, there's a range of industries which can't do that. But even if you are providing flexibility, it's still got to be the right kind of flexibility that works for your customers, for your service, or what you're trying to achieve. And then equally, it's got to be what the employee wants, what works for them in their life, their situation at home, their setup, etc. It has to work on that front. So we've been forced into the scenario. We've had to make it work. But I think if it's going to thrive over time, we've got to make sure we're having a different dialogue around how flexibility matches up between what an employer needs and what an employee needs. Otherwise, it will come crashing down.
Yeah.
And Kim, I think the danger is as well that we need to ensure that employers aren't taking advantage of that 24, almost that 24/7 availability and setting too unrealistic expectations.
Absolutely. It's a real risk and challenge, isn't it, Matt?
It is.
Okay, so we're interested to hear again from you. So are we there yet? So put on your hat in your business. So if you're not there yet with regards to the modern flexibility that we've been speaking about, the team-based, focused on trust in outputs, available for everybody based on choice. If not, what is needed to make flexible working a strong part of our workplace culture or your workplace culture? So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to respond to that. And Matt, if you don't mind, I'll ask you a question about your workplace culture at WSP. So you touched on before that you've got quite good policies and you've been doing this for a while. I'd really love to unpack your flexible working culture. What does it look like and how do you really leverage it to retain and attract staff?
Sure. I think in general, just to summarise up front, it's about a partnership really, and as Kim said earlier, trust is absolutely the key to success. Setting the policies is one thing, and you need good, robust policies, but it's driving that culture of adopting those policies moving forward throughout the business, and particularly angling it towards men sometimes as well to actually jump in and take charge. We've got lots of different options around permanent part-time, resuming from parental leave, part-time work for preschool children, casual work, variable start and finish times, etc., etc. So there's a lot of opportunity there for people to actually take those options up, but if we don't continue to talk about it within our organisations and continually, remind people that they do have those options, that there is a danger that people fall back into that old school 9-to-5 presenteeism approach. So that's why we've really adopted a really strong focus on making sure that we're communicating very, very clearly that people have got these options. They're not exceptional in any particular way. They should be adopted, and we need to make sure that people that are managing others aren't undoing all the great work that some of the leadership are doing as well, so that they're not undermining the people that are taking those flexible options, because that can be sometimes the thing that gets in the way, that there might be a particular middle manager or something like that if they can't see the person, they're not going to accept that flexible work option. So we've really got to focus on trying to eliminate that in the business.
Sometimes it takes someone, I think I read once, 9 times to hear a message before it sinks in. And, I've heard many people over this period say, oh, I'm over communicating with my team. And I'm saying, well, ask them if you're over communicating, ask what support they need. And the responses that I've been getting back was, oh no, they said it's fabulous and it's great. And I think sometimes when you're modernising your approach to flexibility, writing the policy and then telling your workforce that you've done it is not enough. So what you've done, Matt, I think is a classic and fabulous example of that constant living and breathing it. Talk the talk and walk it.
And it starts at the top too. I mean, it has to start with the leaders doing it and being visible. Probably everyone's heard the term leaving loudly. you know, and really demonstrating that you're doing it. A great example of a country that's doing it really well is in Finland. They're just about to enforce a new Working Hours Act in 2020, giving the full-time employees the right to decide when and where they work for at least half of their working hours. I mean, that's great leadership at the top level that should drive flexibility throughout their country.
It absolutely will. And it'll be interesting to see what countries follow. I'm interested in your reflections on these comments. So as you've been talking about, I don't know if you've had a chance to look.
Yeah.
But also Kim and Nikki, I'm interested in your thoughts. For me, training is coming up a lot around leader and manager training and uplifting capability and confidence.
Yeah.
You go, Nikki.
Okay. I was going to say, Vanessa, there isn't anything that I've seen coming up on the screen that I don't agree with. I think the audience has all the answers. And just to reiterate what Matt said, I think that the leadership and good management is first and foremost about how we make this stick and deal with it going forward. It needs an adaptive mindset. It needs emotionally intelligent leadership. It needs a flexible mindset as well. And building trust. The organisations where I've seen this transition through the pandemic go smoothly are the organisations that already had that, where people already felt they could say what they needed, and they worked as a team if they wanted to work flexibly to work out how this would work. They would get their work done as a team, incorporating everyone's desires for flexibility. It doesn't necessarily even need to involve the manager. The manager at the end should be able to give that a tick. If a good team's worked out, well, this is our work, this is how we get it done, and incorporate what everybody wants in terms of flexible working. And then I think the other thing that's really crucial for me as Equal Opportunity Commissioner and convener of the Chiefs of Gender Equity is that, as I've said before, we will never have equality until women are able to or don't have two jobs to do. Basically, the job that they're paid for in the workplace and the massive job that they have to do when they get home in caring and housework responsibilities. So what we need is to make this the new normal is for men to be taking up and be granted flexible work in equal ways to women, and for them to also then take on that caring and housework responsibility and the mental load that's involved in that, not just have a list from their female partner of what they need to do when they're working flexibly and looking after kids, but actually have that understanding of the mental work that is involved in organising and planning the household and the caring as well. And that's when I think we'll see this working beautifully for the benefit of everyone in society.
Vanessa, I think the reflections that the audience are putting up here is a salient reminder that this has created a great opportunity for us to rethink, but an opportunity doesn't translate into a sustained change over time unless we do something consciously about it. So we've opened our eyes, we've seen what's possible, we've seen the opportunity. It's a long way from embedding a changed paradigm, to pick up that word. The rubber band could snap back to where we were, I think, quite easily. And the point that keeps coming back is around leadership and trust and empowerment. And I do think that every organisation needs to now find the space to actually have almost a focused strategic planning thought process around what's the new normal we want for our business and our customers and our employees. What do we want to hold out of this, and how do we make that happen? Because just saying it isn't going to do it. You know, you've got to think about the skill and the training, the technology. You've got to think about how you support people through this. And it won't take as long as it might have done before, because we've all been through the last few months and we've jam-packed a lot of learning, but you still need to do it. Just thinking it will now sort itself out and will happen will be, I think, a major mistake.
Absolutely.
Taking that strategic focus is never been more important, I think. And what you've said there, Kim and Nikki, and I'm sure Matt, you're going to share us your thoughts in a second. It's about how do we reframe? So we've had how we've worked in the past, we've had COVID, and, you know, what does the next look like, and how do we reframe to get there? Because at the end of the day, there's different levels of maturity, and in your business, you might not aspire to be leading, you know, leading as far as modern types of flexibility, and that's okay. But it's painting that picture of where do you want to get to. Sorry, Nat, over to you.
Oh yeah, look, I was just going to add that I've been hearing lots of people just make the statement, oh, I can't wait for things to get back to normal the way they were, you know. Well, on one hand, I understand where they're coming from, and I get that, you know, it's about the social aspects and all that sort of thing. But I think it's a great time to seize the opportunity, make the change. We've all had to make a massive change. Some of us were positioned very well for it to start with, obviously, as was said before. But, you know, I think this has catapulted a lot of industries and businesses into areas that were probably very uncomfortable, but they've made that step change. And now that they've done that, they could actually think more about how they could make their businesses more efficient and profitable, and you know, be more attractive to maybe more part-time workers, which might be more of the female population getting involved in some of their businesses, because they can work on 2 days a week or so forth. So I think it's a massive opportunity that I just don't want to get back to normal.
Yeah. So it's an interesting word that we're using, isn't it, this normal? Can I just share a quick reflection? So about 9 months ago, I had a organisation contact me, and they said, we've got the last bite at the cherry with this executive. We've put up our diversity and our flexible working policy twice before, but there's 2 people on the executive who just shoot it down, and they're really dismissive and very influential. So we need you to come in, and this is our last chance. If we don't do this, the CEO's had enough. And so I thought, oh gosh, and you got 20 minutes was the other thing. I thought, oh, this is fun. I love a challenge. So I got in there, and within 5 minutes, obviously, we were able to really disrupt the beliefs in that group, which was great. And really work through, okay, well, what were some of the really fundamental perceptions and thoughts around flex, and really be able to push the agenda forward. So we've got a question just on that. So I'd love your reflections around, so it's an anonymous person, but they're saying, taking on board all of your comments around upskilling management and gathering data, what's your advice for getting that buy-in with the senior executive, particularly senior executive that aren't supportive of flexible ways of working? So what would be your advice and tips to that person?
I can start if you like. I would recommend that this person takes a look at the Workplace Gender Equality Agency website, where they have brilliant tools for building a business case, setting out a strategy, getting buy-in and engagement, etc., etc. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel, where they've got that regardless of the size of organisation, and a step-by-step approach to this sort of thing. The Chiefs for Gender Equity also have some resources that are available on the Chiefs website around flexible working. There's actually a brilliant brochure, a brilliant little brochure that we did a couple of years ago, that you'll remember, where instead of reinventing the wheel, we just did research about what was available around flexible work, what was the research, what were the resources, and we put it all together in a brochure on the Chiefs for gender equity site, which is available off the Equal Opportunity website. Just Google it. I can't remember the URL, but
I've just put in a link for you.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah, so that would be my suggestion.
Fabulous. Like you said, don't reinvent the wheel. There's experiences and tools and guides out there.
Yeah.
I'm going to be perhaps a touch controversial, and only because I'm using technology, so Nikki can't kick me under the table. But
I'll
I think,
get you later.
Yeah, true enough. I suspect the person asking such a question anonymously is perhaps got a leadership and executive team who might well have read or may not have, all of the research that talks about the value of diversity in the workforce, being able to draw on a wider talent pool, enhanced employee engagement. But for whatever reason, that didn't move them 4 months ago. And the question is that going to move them now? And yeah, I'd like to think so, but you've probably got 3 panelists here who are very much believers and see the upside. I do think one of the other elements to this, it touches on what I was talking about before, but it comes into an organisation's strategy and how they succeed and how they become, achieve their outcomes and objectives. And this is an opportunity to completely rethink what that is and how that does it, with the option now about how flexibility fits into that. So it's not a flexibility for flexibility's sake, but it's flexibility to drive new outcomes for our customers, our service, what we're trying to achieve as an organisation, how we get expertise where we need it, whatever it might be in your own individual business. And if it's driven from, we have organisations have digital strategies and IT strategies in HR, but if their strategy encompassed how and what we could take advantage of flexible working to drive different outcomes, then they're going to think about all the things that they need to do to make that successful, the policies, the training, retraining of their individuals, how do we assess leadership by its ability to get more and more people working flexibly. There's a KPI for a senior manager and executive manager. That's the bit that, for me, fundamentally changes what the world looks like, because we've got a whole range of employees and people who are absolutely willing to embrace this and feed into it, but we've got to have it driven organisationally from what's in it for them.
Yeah, can I add? So what you're saying is it's not a flexible work strategy. It's a perspective on flexible work that is part of the whole organisation strategy.
Correct. It's an organisational strategy of which flexibility is a key plank, like digital is, and the two things really have to go hand in hand today.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
The only other thing that I would add to that as well is if you're getting lots of resistance and you want flexible working, you might maybe even consider asking yourself the same question. Is this the kind of organisation that I want to continue to be involved with, which really is a reflection on where potentially that organisation might be going if they're not thinking about this as a real issue that they should be tackling.
Yeah, if the shoe doesn't fit, which is not ideal, is it? Particularly if you're on that executive team and you can't get that consensus with your colleagues. So
but that will be the reality, I think, going forward. That is, people will, walk away from organisations that can't adapt.
Absolutely. It'd be interesting to see what happens. So obviously we're in an economic downturn, so that potentially will be less than what we've seen in the past. But yeah, absolutely, people will not stick around. Now, before we get to some questions, please type in any questions you've got in the chat box or the Q&A box. We'd love your reflections on this panel discussion. So what's come up for you? What have you learnt? What are you taking away? Has this been helpful and useful? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And also, if you've got any questions, like I said, you just toggle to the Q&A and share with us your questions. So while we're waiting for some responses, how's your flexible working day going? International Flexible Working Day. It seems like a crazy title, doesn't it, given it's flexible working year?
I've got to say, having the advantage of having a study at the front of my house, you know, I'm looking out over a lovely front garden, bathed in blue sky and sunshine in winter in Adelaide. Yeah, who wants, what office? Who wants to go back to that office?
Yeah, exactly. And you can see when your courier arrives with all your groceries and...
Unfortunately, my dog lets me know about that long before the courier gets here. I've been waiting for that to happen in the last hour.
The dog's bark. Yeah, it always comes when you're on a call, right?
Oh, yeah. Particularly when you're chairing a meeting, yeah.
Yeah. You're like, excuse me. All right, we have a question, an anonymous question. With the understanding that each workplace is very different and will implement a flexible working policy uniquely, are there any flexible working policies that would be worth reviewing prior to reviewing our own? So do you know of any that are public that this person can have a look at?
Nikki, I think all of that reference material you talked about earlier, there's plenty of good examples that are probably sitting underneath in that.
Absolutely. I think WGEA is the place to go for that's WGEA Workplace Gender Equality Agency is definitely the starting point to kick off on that. But you've got some great policies at PwC.
Yes, they're not necessarily out in the public domain.
Okay.
But the other place, I think you mentioned it, but I would absolutely recommend people, is the Male Champions of Change website, particularly because, and I saw one of the comments mentioned up here, I think we all know and understand that men have a really important leadership role to play here. This is not about changing the way females operate to navigate a flexible world. It's actually about all of us changing together. And because so much of our executive and leadership teams and organisations, unfortunately, are still very male dominated, it does need to be led and the change enabled from that leadership. And I think some of the tools and policies and ideas that the Male Champions of Change have put out there do really help with that particular perspective.
They definitely do.
Okay, I've shared those links. We've also got some on Flexible Working Day on the website. So it's flexibleworkingday.com. So if you toggle over to Flexpo, also we've got some flex agility kits that will help you. I've also dropped a link to WGEA as well as your Chiefs of Gender, is it equality? Equity. I think I said equality at the beginning, my apologies. So the Chiefs of Gender Equity. So basically what it is, it's in South Australia where they've brought together chief executives from across the state where, from my understanding, you work together on some of these amazing initiatives. So I've shared a link to your website as well, Nikki.
Great, thank you very much. Yes, our chiefs are like the Male Champions for Change, except that we have up to about 50% women chiefs.
That's fabulous. Now we've got some comments here on reflections from the panel discussion today. Before we close off, I'll just call for any last questions and a final comment from each of you. So Kim, would you like to go first?
Sure, and it's probably introducing something a little bit different at the back end of the conversation, but we've talked a lot about flexible working in the context of just working from home. But the other element that's really important is about part-time working and flexibility in a part-time operation, which hasn't been as big a part of the conversation. We've been in probably the unfortunate situation as a firm where some parts of our business have seen a huge drop-off in work, and we've moved to what we call a reduced working week for a number of staff, which is an 80% of their normal workload. That's got a lot of downside. That's clearly unfortunate. But the upside has been that we've actually had an awful lot of people, and I will call it out, an awful lot of our male staff who are experiencing what it's like to work part-time for the first times in their careers, and what they need from everyone else around them to make that work and be successful and not to have blurred lines between work and life. I'm really hopeful that the upside of that is a large number of people who really get how to supervise, manage and help others succeed in a part-time environment. That's our experience from a PwC point of view, but how do you actually then take that learning and that knowledge and blend it out into other organisations? Because I think if we can get the part-time bit and the working from home bit right, the opportunities for organisations to really rethink how work looks and what their future looks like is just enormous.
Dr. Vincent, we've had a question come in, so if you don't mind, if I can pose this to you in your final comments as well. So what would you do if your team leader or your manager is not supportive of flexible work, even in this current situation? He also has a habit of unempowering the idea of equality in the workplace.
It's a very tough one. It's, I mean, you know, as you said, it's a downturn, so it's hard for people to walk away from that. But ultimately, you know, that's one of the things I'd have on my list. I guess just a person like that is possibly less likely to listen to counter arguments in that regard. But I would be finding ways in which to frame this, and the person has said it's a him, that are of benefit to him, how this could help him and what he wants. So you've really got to get inside his head and start speaking where his head is at around some of this stuff. That's you know, just one small thing that I can think of off the top of my head. There is an awful lot of work with research we've already talked about that you can put in front of people. And then maybe just the other thing that I think is often helpful for people who are really fearful about doing this stuff is to offer a pilot or a safe to fail experiment where you do this for a limited time, you put it in place for a limited time, and then you evaluate it, and so that way it's something that the person doesn't have to 100% buy into, but is willing to experiment for a short period of time, and often that then shows that it can work and it can be successful.
Thank you. And over to you, Matt.
I would just probably just close by saying some of the tips, I think, is just to make sure that people that are working flexibly are really monitoring their time, that they're not overcommitting themselves beyond what would be expected, because there could be, you know, that really does go to the mental health issue as well. And I think as leaders and managers, we just need to continue to touch base with our people and look for those behavioural issues that may arise from time to time, because it's not necessarily always easy for people to be sitting in their lounge room working from home always. So we've got to kind of put a bit of a lens on that. Keep up the communication as much as possible, the social interaction. The whole term social distancing was a problem for me, because at this point in time, we need to be as social as we possibly can, but we just do it a lot differently. And keep the training, keep that communication, keep that discussion going around flexible working. If you can keep talking about it, you're more likely to actually achieve the end goal.
Fabulous. Thank you, Matt. I had a problem with that as well. I heard someone say physical distancing, which sounded so much better.
Yep.
So that's what I say, but it hasn't got picked up by anyone. So thank you for the fabulous Chiefs of Gender Equity in South Australia for supporting this panel today. And thank you, Matt, Dr. Vincent and Kim, for all of your contributions. It's been absolutely fabulous. And we can see from the reflections people have taken away lots of insights and experiences, things that they can take back to their workplace. So thank you. Happy
Thanks
Flex.
so much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.